Welcome to this Philosophy MT video about early Western philosophy. In this second part, we will be looking at the pluralism of people like Anaxagoras and Empedocles, and the ancient, atomic theories of Leucippus and Democritus. We will then see how Western philosophy, after emerging in the outer reaches of Greater Greece, finally arrived in Athens, the center of ancient Greek commerce and culture, with the Sophists. There it found, and developed, a more humanist bent, through Socrates, Plato and Aristotle, laying the foundations for centuries, and millennia, of thought. Please like, share and subscribe, to help the channel bring you more content. The pluralist school, a refined revision of change. In contrast with the monism of the Eleatic school of Parmenides, the pluralists rejected the idea that the diversity of nature can be reduced to a single principle. Marking a return to Milesian natural philosophy, they tried to reconcile Parmenides' rejection of change with what our sensory experience seems to be telling us. Anaxagoras, circa 450 BCE, suggested that there are numerous principles, or ingredients, in nature. Everything is infinitely divisible. In everything, there is a portion of all these ingredients. Even the smallest fragment contains some of each element. These ingredients combine in different doses to create different materials and objects. In everything, there is a portion of everything, and of all opposites, such as hot and cold, or white and black. In contrast with his predecessors, Anaxagoras regarded the nous, or mind, as a substance that enters all living things, and distinguishes them from dead matter. It is an infinite substance which governs itself, and remains pure, in that it does not mix with other things. Later Christian and Islamic philosophers, in the Middle Ages, would develop the idea of a cosmic mind, to account for God, the immortality of the soul, and even the motion of the stars. Empedocles, circa 440 BCE, was another pluralist, who reduced the primary ingredients of the universe to four roots: fire, air, earth, and water. These roots are simple, eternal, and cannot change. However, between them, these roots are enough to explain change and diversity. These four roots come together and divide, and when we experience change, we experience differences in the proportions of these amounts. Empedocles called the force that brings the roots together love, while he called the force that separates them strife. These two forces grow and shrink. They go through a cycle, taking it in turns to dominate each other. As Bertrand Russell explains, when the elements have been thoroughly mixed by love, strife gradually sorts them out. When strife has separated them, love gradually reunites them. However, neither force completely escapes the other. The roots themselves cannot be reduced further, but also, nothing new can come into being that is not made of these four roots. Empedocles' theory of the four roots became standard belief for the next 2,000 years, known as the dogma of the four classical elements. Atomic theory. The atomic theory of Leucippus, and of his pupil, Democritus, circa 415 BCE, was also a response to the Eleatic school of Parmenides. The two were strict determinists, denying that anything can happen by chance, and that, on the contrary, everything happens in accordance with natural law. Very little is known about Leucippus. However, it is probable that the atomism that made Democritus famous was actually invented by Leucippus. They proposed that all matter was composed of small, indivisible particles called atoms. If we take any chunk of stuff and start dividing, we're eventually left with tiny, invisible particles that cannot be divided further. Our modern use of the word atom is derived from the Greek for cannot be cut. According to Democritus, atoms and the void are the only things that exist. These atoms, which have existed forever, have different shapes, and are scattered, and float, in an infinite, empty space which he called the void. Some atoms have hooks, some have loops, some are convex, some are concave. Sometimes they crash into each other and link up, forming the objects that we see in everyday life. Likewise, human perceptions are also caused by atoms. For example, bitterness would be caused by a small, jagged atom, skimming the tongue, whereas sweetness would be caused by a larger, smoother, more rounded atom. Smells function in a way similar to flavors. Colors, sounds, and textures are similarly explained by the qualities and properties of their essential atoms. As well as natural science, Democritus also wrote commentaries and works about mathematics, literature, and ethics. His emphasis on the value of cheerfulness earned him the nickname, the laughing philosopher. For Democritus, being happy with absence of fear is the definition of good. Moderation and mindfulness are beneficial in the pursuit of pleasures. The atomist, materialist views of Leucippus and Democritus would prove to be influential on several important philosophers throughout the history of philosophy. More than a century later, they would influence the natural philosophy of Epicurus of Samos, circa 300 BCE, who in turn would be an influence on modern philosophers like Kant and Nietzsche. The move to Athens. Around 450 BCE, Athens was the cultural center of the Greek world. People from all over the region made their way to Athens, looking for fame and good fortune. Gradually, a democracy evolved, with popular assemblies and courts of law. These were at the center of the city's life. The reputation and status of individuals could be made or broken, depending on how well they performed in public debates. For democracy to work, people had to be educated enough to be able to take part in the democratic process. The Sophists. Among those arriving in Athens were a number of wandering intellectuals from other Greek towns and cities. In Athens, some of these wandering intellectuals made a living out of teaching citizens. Traditionally, the natural philosophers had been largely interested in the nature of the physical world. However, these new, wandering teachers, known as the Sophists, were as doubtful of traditional mythology as were the natural philosophers. But other than this suspicion, these two groups had little in common. While the natural philosophers believed that there were truths about the cosmos that can be sought, the Sophists held that we have no way of knowing such truths, or even if truth existed at all. In philosophy, this position is called skepticism. Instead, the Sophists, which included Protagoras, circa 450 BCE, and Gorgias, circa 430 BCE, chose to focus their thinking on people and their place in society. They were skilled in rhetoric, the art of knowing how to say things in a convincing manner. The Sophists extended their skepticism also to human nature and behavior. This had the effect of throwing into doubt the very notion of morality, which governs how we should conduct ourselves. Once the notion of morality is challenged and rejected, then actions of all sorts can be justified, on the basis that nothing is absolutely right, or absolutely wrong. Rather, everything becomes relative. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates, circa 400 BCE, is a towering figure in Western philosophy. He is credited with having made a definitive move in philosophy, beyond speculation about the cosmos and nature, and into ethics and other areas. He also developed what we now call the Socratic method, also known as Socratic dialogue. This is a method of investigation that works by asking question after question, identifying contradictions in one's beliefs and ideas, and then attempting to fix them. What we know of Socrates is, mostly, through the works of his eminent student and younger contemporary, Plato, circa 380 BCE. After Socrates' execution in 399 BCE, Plato left Athens to travel to places like Egypt and Italy, before returning to set up the academy and write his dialogues. Almost all his dialogues feature Socrates as the main character. It is generally accepted that the Socrates of the earlier dialogues sounds more like the real one, while Plato took more liberty with the character in his later works, using him as a mouthpiece for the writer's own ideas. Aristotle, circa 350 BCE, was originally from Stagira, a city in Macedonia. At the age of 17, he was sent to Athens, where he enrolled in Plato's academy. There, he would spend almost 20 years, first as a student, and then as a teacher. After Plato's death, he left Athens, and at the request of Philip, king of Macedon, tutored the king's son, who would eventually become Alexander III of Macedon, commonly known as Alexander the Great. Although Aristotle wrote hundreds of works, only around a third of his original work has survived, none of which seems to have been intended to be published. Despite this, his effect on subsequent philosophy, including Islamic and Christian philosophy, logic, ethics, and other areas, was immense. Pre-Socratic. Does it mean before Socrates? In the 18th century, the term pre-Socratic was coined to gather those thinkers who came before Socrates, and with him, those who had not adopted Socrates' method of inquiry. Much of their work and writing has been almost entirely lost, compared to a large amount of surviving works by Plato and Aristotle. Knowledge of them comes, overwhelmingly, from quotes, paraphrases, and discussions by later authors. Their surviving, collective fragments can be gathered in one volume. By calling him pre-Socratic, we seem to relegate him to mere precursors to greater things. Moreover, the term pre-Socratic is a term that is, at least partially, chronologically inaccurate, as the last of the pre-Socratics were, actually, contemporary with Socrates. Perhaps, a more appropriate way to call them would be, first Western philosophers. Did you enjoy this video? Watch Philosophy MT's other videos. Please subscribe to help the channel bring you more content. You can also help keep the channel alive by donating a coffee. Any donation is much appreciated. Check the video description for the link. Meanwhile, check out these other videos from Philosophy MT.